scalpel, 10 blade, heart monitor. Now let the surgery begin. I know I'm a drama queen, so please just bear with me. Today's tutorial is on the alterations of this beautiful prom dress. I know I've been watching too much Grey's Anatomy, and that's the only reason why I will compare altering a prom dress to open heart surgery. But just bear with me, it is Meredith Grey's fault, and let's just go on with this alteration. So, to alter a dress, the first step is to know where exactly you want to alter. For this dress, I'm altering the shoulders, I'm going to alter the sleeves, I'm going to alter the waist area, I'm also going to alter the peplum part of it as well. In order to get to the peplum part and anywhere inside the dress, I'm going to open that waist area that is connecting the upper part to the lower part, because I need access to the flare part, I need access to the inside of the dress as well. It is difficult because there is lining on the dress. If there was no lining, all the seams would be visible and to be more straightforward. The next thing that I want to do is to reduce the upper part of the dress, and the easiest way for me to do that is to tamper with the shoulders. So that is why I'm going to open the shoulder seam to reduce it by at least 1 inch so that it can push up a little bit, and also the deep V neckline will be a little bit higher than it is right now. So starting with the sleeves, I want to take in the sleeves by 1 inch, just 1 inch, because I measured my client and she needs it to just be reduced by 1 inch on the sleeve area. So I'm going to take my tape roll and I'm going to mark 1 inch at the seam of the sleeve. So make sure that it's at the seam of your sleeve or at the seam of anything that you are actually marking, not the folded area, but the seam. So what happened is that I marked the 1 inch, and then I'm going to trace that 1 inch slowly to meet the original seam of the dress. So I'm going to take my ruler now and draw like a dart. The dart is going to connect from the 1 inch I marked to meet the seam at like the armpit area. So it must meet it at that junction. Now, after doing the sleeves, we're going to go to the shoulder part of it. So because I want to reduce the shoulder a little bit, I have to loosen the seam for both the lining and for the fabric itself. So I'm going to get my scalpel and I'm going to start opening the thread right there because I want access into the shoulder seams. Now that I have access to the shoulder area, I'm going to open it up like you're seeing me do, and then I'm going to get my chalk, and then I'm also going to take the shoulder in by 1 inch from the seam area. I'm going to measure 1 inch like that. I'm going to grab my ruler, and then I'm going to trace the 1 inch all the way to the general seam. So this is it. I've laid it flat now, and I'm going to do just that. That yellow line is exactly where we're going to stitch on the sewing machine. I don't know how this doesn't remind you of open heart surgery. It definitely does. Like, they open people up and stitch them back up together. Like, they open them up, fix everything inside and stitch them back together. Like, don't you see the metaphor, the analogy, the comparison, the similarity? If you don't see it, then let's just move on to the next stage. The lining part is, I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the lining part. I'm going to open it up and also take my 1 inch and sew that back to the seam area. So after marking that, the next thing that we want to do now is to go to the waist area. Now the waist area, I want to take that in by 1.25 inches. But to access my waist area, I have to open the joining between the peplum part and the upper part. You know that seam that I'm touching right now? That's where I'm going to open up to be able to gain access to it. Now that place was serged, so I'll prefer to use scissors to cut it out instead of trying to loosen it. Losing a serge stitch is like, it's going to delay our surgery, and we don't want that. We want this patient to be well and healthy very, very soon. Now that I have full access into the upper chest of my patient, I can now have access to the shoulder, I have access to the waist part, I have access to the lining of the waist, I can have access to every part just because I opened up that middle seam. So now we're going to take away 1.25, that's 1/4 from the waist area. So I'm going to take it out a little bit more to have more access to that side seam. I'm going to bring out my waist, just like my waist seam, that is, like you have seen me do, and then I'm going to measure 1/4 next to the seam. I'm not going to measure it from the edge, I'm going to measure it from the seam, the existing seam. That's when I'm going to measure 1/4 from. So I'm going to measure that 1/4, mark it, get my ruler, and then I'm going to draw a slanted line or a darted line from that 1/4 to like the armhole area, because I'm trying to make sure that it progresses slowly to the original side seam of my waist or my bust to waist area. And then I'm going to repeat the same thing for the peplum. Now this dress has two peplum layers. One of the peplum layers has a seam, the other one does not have a seam. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to first of all focus on the one that has a seam, because that one is easier to work with. At least I can connect my new line to my seam. So I'm going to measure 1/1/4. The same amount that I took for the waist area is the same amount I'm going to take for the peplum area, and I'm going to connect it with a straight line. So from the 1/1/4 to the original seam of the peplum. Now we have done the shoulder part, we have done the side, the waist part, and we have done the peplum part. We have drawn all the yellow lines, so we know exactly what to measure. Now we are going to take it to the heart monitor. Now I'm going to just take it there, and I was going to use my serger to serge it, but something happened and my serger needle broke because the sequin was very, very strong. So my serger needle broke twice, and at that point we learned our lesson that we needed a stronger heart monitor or ventilator, defibrillator, something later. We need a stronger something later to handle this sequin hard-headed patient. So anyways, this is what happened so far, but at this point my needle had already broken, so I had to move to another sewing machine. Even on this sewing machine, my needle broke about 4 times, but it's fine. The sewing machine is stronger than the serger. Let us, continue what we're doing. So I took my shoulder and I'm going to sew on the yellow line that we made. So let's assume that the yellow line was still in existence, and then I'm going to sew along that yellow line, or whatever chalk marker line that you drew when you are trying to alter your own dress. So I'm going to sew on that yellow line, and then yes, at this point my needle broke again, so I am replacing another needle. Believe me, lots and lots of needles broke during this surgery, but we give glory to God because the patient survived it all. So after taking the shoulder in, this is what it looks like on the outside, and I have to then do the same thing for the lining of the shoulder area. Now to do that, I have to access it through the waist part. So I went in through the waist part that I opened up before, and then now I'm going to just sew my lining together also on the yellow line that I made. So from the one inch, I just created like a dart, or I sewed it like a dart to the original seam that was on the dress originally, and then I backstitched that, and then we have our shoulder is already complete. And I'm going to trim off all the excess so that there is no bulge in the dress or in the on the outside appearance of the dress. Make sure that there is no bulge. So when we opened up our shoulder, there became a separation between the lining and the main fabric. So now we need to remarry them together in holy matrimony. So now I'm going to go in through the waist area and bring it out, and then I'm going to just lay that place flat just like you are seeing me do, and I'm going to just stitch along that side so that the lining and the sequin fabric can become one once again. So after sewing them together, I'm turning it inside out, and you see that there is no more space again between the lining and the fabric, and everybody is good and everything is looking fine and everything is looking great. So the next thing now is to alter the sleeve part of it. Now the sleeve part of it is so very easy because there is no lining. Our yellow line is very evident, so all I have to do is sew from the armhole area that the yellow line stopped and sew it all the way to the end of the sleeve like that. Maybe after a while, when my serger is doing better, or I have gotten a lot of needles, so if it breaks, it will be fine. Then I'm going to use a serger to sew that part and cut off all the excess with a serger, because that place is obvious, so we want to make sure that it is neat and it is not looking funny. And so the next step now is to go to the waist part. Oh, our patient is looking better. The patient is responding well to treatment. So at this sleeve area, I'm just going to also follow the yellow line, and then I'm going to sew all the way down to the rest of my sleeve. If you guys want to say a prayer for my patient, please put up a prayer for my patient. Medicine might not be enough for this situation. We might need a little bit of faith to make sure our patient pulls through. Okay, a moment of prayer, not silence, so prayer. So I have gotten off all the excess parts of the dress of this side seam, because there's a lining on it, so it's going to cover it. So I don't really need to serge that part. So that lining is going to cover that place, as you can see. Now we have to do the same thing for the lining. You see that excess? The excess is because we already slimmed down the main fabric, so we have to also slim down the lining fabric. So I'm also going to sew using the same yellow line that I marked on the fabric. So you see that it's always a good idea to make sure that you mark all your alterations with a chalk or a marker or something before actually taking it to the sewing machine, because it makes it so much easier when you want to alter. Now this surgery is going so very well, so very well. The next thing now is to just take the peplum part that has the seam, not the main one, just the one that has the seam first, and then we are going to sew it like on the yellow line, and I'm going to sew it in a slanted way from the top using the yellow line markings that I already did, and I'm going to sew it to join the regular seam. Now the second to the last step is to go to the main peplum area. So I'm going to teach you how to alter a peplum skirt or a peplum dress that does not have any seam. So you're going to create something like a dart. It's going to be like a dart, like a real dart. Since there is no seam, we have to have like an imaginary dart. So I'm just going to trace it like a dart from my 1.5 inches all the way to the main fabric. So you see what it looks like on the other side, and because it's a sequin fabric, it's not even that obvious that we actually created a dart. Now I don't really like my dart, it is a little bit too short, so I'm going to start again from the beginning and be gradual with it. So especially if you're not even using a sequin fabric that will cover up your mistake. So I'm going to be gradual with it this time and make sure that it slopes as gradually as it possibly can, so there will be no evidence at all, no evidence whatsoever that we actually created a dart in that peplum area to reduce the wideness of the waist circumference on the peplum. Now we've gotten the final stage of closing up our patient. Our patient survived this surgery, give all the glory to God. Now I just need to close the upper part with the lower part. They're exactly the same circumference now, since we took exactly the same, we removed exactly the same amount of fabric from both of them. So now I'm just going to sew the upper part and the lower part together all the way around. Now you have to understand that I did this surgery for only one side of my dress, so you have to do the same thing for the other side because they are perfectly symmetrical. So since I reduced the shoulder, the waist, the peplums of this one side, you have to do the same thing for the other side. At this point my needle broke again, but I think it broke at just that, like the last second, the tiniest part that was actually needed. That was where it broke. I don't know, I won't say it is village people, but it's fine. The Lord is greater than them all. It's fine. So at this point we have finished all alterations to this dress. We have done everything is looking good, so we are going to just repeat that to the other side, and I don't need to show you that since we are going to do exactly the same. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all your attention, and I'm going to see you same time next week. Don't forget to like this video, don't forget to share it, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and check out all the other videos. See you. Bye.